if you were to close your eyes and you were to feel the bottle of Coca-Cola, you would be able to recognize it as being Coke. You could more than likely differentiate it from a Pepsi bottle because they have different shapes, right? And that's what I mean by sensory footprint, right? So I think there are a lot of people out there, a lot of clients that tried neuromarketing or they tried, some sort of psychological approach, and they were disappointed in the results. And I think the reason for that is that these tools can't be done in a vacuum.
Alternate profession could have been?
Tango instructor.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravee, conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Hi, Michelle. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Okay. Michelle, I'm going to request you to tweet your profile. What would you say?
Tweet my profile.
Yes.
Yes. So I've joked in the past that, if I were going to tweet my profile or have like a short description, I've always said estrogenius, right? But yeah, behavioral neuroscientist, always looking to learn more.
So now market research also is getting obsessed with fancy techniques. So it's its profile,
Yes.
It's becoming more hip. So EEG and facial EMG and, brain imaging and so many, words and phrases and terms and concepts get thrown around. But I love how you advocate that, the poorer cousins, the implicit association and the call quant techniques, they also have a role. So don't completely substitute them. Have the right combination of techniques. So you really understand how consumer is experiencing a product. So
absolutely.
When it comes to a product consumption, how and why each technique has a role. And if you could take an example, I don't know why I had from listening, I was listening to some of your podcasts, this relaxing chair was one example, but please feel free to, so that
relaxing is a big question.
Understand. Yeah.
Relaxing is a huge question that people ask all the time because, even though it sounds simple, it can be very complicated. And we work with clients all the time that range from people designing chairs to lotions to commercials to whatever it might be, right? We go the whole gamut of consumer experience. And relaxing, just to take it as an example of how complicated this can get or how you can look at it in different ways, you could just ask someone. Right? You can just ask them, is this chair relaxing? And they can give you an answer. Right? Someone can say, no, I don't feel very relaxed. But keeping in mind that can actually be a difficult thing a lot of times for a consumer to report. So if I ask you what's relaxing, is this chair relaxing? They might have a hard time. Well, what does relaxing mean? Is it comfortable? Yes, it's comfortable. But do I feel like I'm going to go to sleep? If I'm stressed, is it going to take away my stress? So there's a lot of different types of interpretations that people can have if you just ask them relaxing. And that can introduce a lot of variability. So if I were to set up the study, have people try out a chair, give them a survey that said, how relaxing is this, 0 to 7? They can give an answer, but you may not get the differentiation that you're looking for. So if you're looking to do something that is going to differentiate, say, 4 prototypes of chairs that you've designed, and you want to go with the most relaxing one, right? That's the one we want to move forward with. How can I show that one of them is actually more relaxing? And a lot of times people start leaning into not the self-report. It is still important. You still should ask, right? Because it's kind of that if a tree falls in a forest issue. So if I measure relaxing physiologically, does it matter if the person doesn't feel that they're relaxed? So you do need to always ask still. But there's other ways you can measure relaxing, right? So you can use EEG, for example, to look at relaxation and drowsy states and things like that. You can use heart rate. You can look at heart rate variability in particular. So you can use heart rate variability and do analyses on the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So you can read into that data and see if they're more in the sympathetic realm. So you're getting that rest and digest. It'll be signaling more of the relaxation side. You can look at arousal, right? Looking at GSR, looking at the skin conductance on the palm of the hand, and be able to see whether or not they're getting more excited or if that's starting to go down. Now, naturally, it goes down. So you have to understand a little bit about the measure. But we recommend that if you really want to say differentiate those 4 chairs, which the designers were asked to make relaxing chairs. So they're probably all at least a little bit relaxing. But how do you choose the best one? If you can use multiple measures, you ask the consumer, which is always important, and maybe you do that heart rate variability and you do the GSR. Maybe you also do the EEG, just to make sure you capture all understanding. Because again, maybe it is physiologically relaxing in the HRV, but is it because the person's falling asleep? When you are saying, I want a relaxing chair, do you mean that you want them to fall asleep or just that they're at ease? Right? Which brings in a whole nother phase to it when you think about research design, which is, okay, it's a relaxing chair, but for what? Right? So a lot of times when you think about whether it's a chair or a lotion or, you know, something like a gummy that you eat that's for relaxing, then you might think, for what and how can I best show? And sometimes in the research design, the best way to show that there's relaxing is give someone a stressor. Right? So if I stress you out and then put you in the chair, which one is most effective at solving the stress? So that's another way you can look at it. So it's really a combination of using the right tools and using the right research design and doing the right statistics to really show that there are significant differences among these 4 chairs.
Yeah, wow. If we just talk about the conventional research, qualitative, quantitative, and their behavioral science, I don't know if neuroscience can also be part of it, but behavioral science, at least in the interpretation and in the coining of the questions, is getting used. Is this really a new approach in terms of how research should be conducted and interpreted? Is this just a term, or is this really a new orientation to us as human beings, and how we are so similar, and how we've actually evolved, but not as much as we think we have?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think that there's a lot of taking old ideas, and not really old, but, when you're talking about qualitative approaches and quantitative approaches, these are the tools of behavioral scientists, but they've been done for a very long time. In some ways, it's maybe tweaking the questions a little bit or putting them together in an order that tells a slightly different story. Like I said, with the designing of the research for the chairs, with a better understanding about the decision-making process, you can design your research a little bit better. So it is an evolution, I would say, considering behavior and considering decision making when doing any of this research. It's an evolution. And yes, you can call it behavioral sciences, or you can call it consumer research. It's the same, really, right? But you're kind of just doing consumer research in a more thoughtful way. And some of that is that evolution of, if you look, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, when people were doing consumer research, they were really focusing on the product and not the consumer, not the person using the product. So how can we improve this product? Oh, we can change the ingredients. We can make the ingredients cheaper. We can make the active stronger. Any of these things, we can change the price, et cetera, and so on, but not really considering the consumer and understanding how they make their decisions. Why are they using this product? Is it because it's sweet? No, not necessarily. They have, brand loyalty. They have choices that they're making when they're choosing, this drink over that drink. And so I think we have an evolution happening right now with consumer science, where people are starting to come back and focus on the consumer. And to do that, you need to really understand their decision-making processes, which is that behavioral sciences approach.
Yeah, understand them as an individual. I mean, it was said earlier, look at them as an individual, not as a customer. But now with behavioral science, I mean, you really have to
Yeah, take it into account, that context might be driving their decision making to buy this product over that product. All sorts of things, even down to the packaging or the flavor or, any number of things. And it is important to think about. I think people relied more on, well, if we just put enough money into marketing, right? If we put enough money into the ads, people will buy it. Or if we just make it sweeter, people will buy it. And that sort of was true, but I think people have a lot of options now, and we understand a little bit more about, brand loyalty and, healthy choices and things that people are doing.
The understanding and the models that we've built with qual and quant techniques, it can be linked to, the findings of neuromarketing. That is when you actually that is when you actually know what to do with that understanding. Like you talk about action standards and, what are you going to do with that understanding? Where are the benchmarks? And hence now, how is it going to
That
evolve?
is where people get disappointed, right? So I think there are a lot of people out there, a lot of clients that tried neuromarketing or they tried, some sort of psychological approach, and they were disappointed in the results. And I think the reason for that is that these tools can't be done in a vacuum. If you do EEG, you don't just look at those EEG results and make some sort of business decision on it. You need to combine it with asking questions of the participants. You need a certain design. Like I said before, maybe you need to stress people out and then measure their reaction to understand things, but you have to put it in a context. And that context might mean the type of stimuli that you're comparing. You can't just use one stimulus, measure the EEG response, and expect to be able to tell a story from it. It's like in relation to what, right? So it's kind of, again, that issue of if a tree falls in the forest, okay, so they had a relaxing brain signal in their head for this chair, but is it more relaxing than doing nothing? Right? Did they actually feel relaxed? We should ask them, because they're not going to buy the chair if they don't actually feel relaxed and they know they feel relaxed, right? So it's an action standards. So the action standards are where people end up missing a lot. The client ends up getting disappointed because if they don't have an action standard that says, okay, to choose among these 4 chairs, to choose a winner, it has to be X, Y, and Z. And those X, Y, and Z might be that it has to be statistically different than the other chairs, right? It has to really perform better. So I think that's what ends up being most important in making the business decision. What is that qualification to say that we succeeded? How do we know that this is the right chair to go forward with?
And the starting point again would be the consumer and what their perception of relaxation is, like you were saying, and their ritual of it or their conditioning of it. I mean, so much belief of it.
Right. Sometimes you need to ask them in the area of chairs, right? Again, taking that example, in the area of chairs, what does relaxing mean to the consumer? And it's probably quite different than if I were to say, okay, here's this gummy that's supposed to have an active in it that makes you relaxed. The words that they would use to describe the gummy are going to be quite different than the words they use to describe the chair, right? Because the relaxation from the chair is one thing. It's probably a lot of comfort, let's say, comfort and warmth and, softness and things like that. And the gummy is going to be like, oh, probably sleepiness, those types of words, like they actually feel something like in that sense. And so that's where you start bringing in that qual and quant. It's really important to understand what the consumer means in that context, because the contexts are very different.
And culturally, again, I mean,
oh yeah,
now that you're talking across 2 different countries, I mean, so I mean, really, I mean, all that we've built, you've got to take that ahead with what you're unearthing.
And that's a really hard thing, right? Because I think we live in a global economy, right? And when you have a large company that wants to put out a drink, right? They want it to be successful in the US, in the EU, in India, in China, in South America, and everywhere, right? But that's really hard when you have different expectations and different consumers with different needs. And so a lot of times they end up aiming for the middle. Right. And so a lot of times you end up with mediocrity because you're trying to appease everybody. Right. But that's like kind of the unfortunate part about, a global economy. But then you can also just understand little things that can be tweaked, So for like understanding that Brazil likes more vibrant, stronger fragrances, right? Something like that, or that, in the US, they want much more subtle fragrances. So understanding little nuances like that are really important.
Yeah. And that brings us to another favorite topic of yours, sensory marketing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Like, I think people don't even realize it exists, right?
Yeah. That's the beauty of it, I think. Yeah.
It's amazing. A really good story on it is that one of my colleagues, Marcella, she got married and she bought a special perfume to wear on her wedding day. And the reason for that is because she never wore this perfume before, but now it has a memory linked with it. And so she brings it out on special occasions, anniversaries, things like that, where she can bring out the perfume again and it brings back that moment, right? Because we know that like olfaction is very well linked to memory. And so people forget how important it is, but these different sensory things are really how we navigate the world. We understand that if we smell gas, there's danger, right? It's very important to survival to have these sensory cues, but it helps us navigate the world around us. We're constantly sampling, seeing things, tasting things, smelling things, touching things, and they tell us how we should interpret what's going on. And what's really interesting is we can trick it a little bit, right? So like another really fun story is that there was a study that was done where you could have a set of towels, right? They're all exactly the same towel. And they're just fragranced differently. And people will rate the softness of those towels differently based on that fragrance. And that's really interesting that a fragrance could make you believe that a towel is softer than it really is, or harsher for that matter, right? So it's very important when you think about if you're designing a product, whether it's a shampoo, a lotion, a baby doll, whatever it might be, there's a couple of things you can do there. You can end up influencing someone's perception, or you can end up having it be like a branding moment. So this particular flavor is always going to be linked and identified as this particular brand, so owning your identity and signaling what you want it to signal.
Yeah. And so you talk about sensory footprint and you were talking about how brand harmony, and how everything should say one thing. I mean, we're talking about, so if the fragrance is not communicating softness, but you've written that on the pack, you're trying to say that, but at that moment of truth, it's going to take away from the brand promise or the brand benefit that you're trying to communicate.
Shampoo is a really good example because when people go to the store to buy something like a shampoo or a soap, they tend to open it up or at least smell the package in the store. They pick it up and they smell it. And it's because they're wanting to know, oh, is this me? Is this shampoo something I would like? Right. And they smell it. So a good example is, I don't know if you know this brand very well, but if you walk into the store and you pick up this bottle of shampoo and it's green and it's got pictures of fruit on the front of it and the name is Fructis, right? And you pop the lid and you smell it and it smells like vanilla. Research actually shows that even if you love the smell of vanilla by itself, in that context, you're actually not going to like it. Your ranking of it on a Likert scale will be low. All because it doesn't match. It's incongruent. So there's all sorts of sensory research out there showing that incongruent sensory inputs decrease liking, which of course decrease purchase intent. So making sure that whatever people see your brand as is if it's Fructis, you're expecting a fruity smell, right? If you're going for a Coca-Cola, you're expecting it to taste a certain way because you know what that is. You know the sensory footprint of Coca-Cola. So you have expectations, and when consumers' expectations are not met, they're disappointed and they won't repurchase.
And like you were saying earlier, that the brain is going to decode this as don't trust it. This is not what it is saying it is. A lot of times we do sniff test also, for the food. Has it gone bad? Is it, it looks okay, but no, not really. So brain is deciding so many things about safety and trust just by the fragrance. Another interesting thing you were talking about earlier was how to take this, online, because and even the service industry, because the pandemic has made online.
Yes. Yes, here we are.
I think I'm having a freer conversation here across two continents and countries. I mean, if we were sitting next to each other, I'd be wearing a mask,
Yes.
and keeping social distance. So, what about online, the sensory marketing?
Yeah. We all pivoted, right, when the pandemic hit, and we continued to do quite a bit of work. Now, a lot of it shifted, of course, to doing online qual and online surveys, which we were already doing, but just leaning more into it and really thinking of different ways we can incorporate other measures to get at these sort of what I call higher order benefits. So when we're talking about measuring relaxation or measuring, other sort of psychological states of being, are there other ways we can get to it? Absolutely. Right. So and that's where you start leaning into an understanding of psychological methodologies that do exist out there, like implicit association that can be done online, self-assessment mannequin, which is an emotional measure. We use that quite often. That can be done online. You can do online facial coding. But you already have the issues with the facial coding from before. One thing you have to realize when you move things online, especially if you're using something like a webcam, you are at the mercy of some issues. And some of those issues are people's quality of their camera, right? You don't have control over what is in their room. Right. So if they have a dog barking, if they're taking care of a baby, if they're cooking something, this is all noise that's going to be introduced into your research now that you can't control. And so what's unfortunate is a lot of times in that type of online research with something like facial coding, you end up throwing out a lot of data. So you have to over recruit into the hundreds and thousands because you can lose 75% of your data just because it's bad. And also people have to opt in to allowing you to use their camera, and you lose a significant number of people that say, you know what, I don't want you looking at my camera. So there are challenges to doing online research, and we do our best to work around it, but you do have to realize those people that you lost that didn't want to do your camera, now you have to wonder, is my subject pool representative anymore? Because now you're missing a type of person that doesn't trust you to have access to their computer. So, we're always concerned with representativeness of sample. So keeping that in mind, that you may not be accessing a certain population, and that you're missing, more than half of the people that you could have measured.
Right. Michelle, how now the sensory marketing aspect, the touch and feel aspect, but and the physical sensation. So how can this be affirmed in e-commerce? How, will it be just words, or are we getting into augmented reality here?
A little bit, right? So whether we're talking about it's so funny. People think of augmented reality and they think about the metaverse, right? Now, Facebook would not be interested in the metaverse if it wasn't important, right? But in a lot of ways, we're already there, So look at us. We're having this conversation over Zoom. And it is an interactive situation where we're in totally different realities. I'm in my reality here in the basement of my home, right? You're in your reality on a different continent, different time of day, right? And so we are already in the metaverse, and we're experiencing things, and technology keeps changing, right? So if you have a smart speaker in your home, you're already interacting in a way that's augmented. So you can do surveys on a smart speaker. There are packages that have smart labels on them that can sense how much of your drink you've already used and send that data back, right? So it can record that data. So we're already operating in this sort of next generation of technology that can include a lot of the sensory stuff that we're already doing. We do a lot of our sensory research remotely, right? So you can send people products and you can have people experience them in their own homes, which actually brings in a really good context, because when you bring someone into a CLT, right, a central location testing, to test in a sterile booth, right? That's not the real situation they would use shampoo in, right? But if you let them use it at home, or you let them measure them while they're in a store, you really have an opportunity to open up the box and really understand how they would really use it, how they would really react. What are their real feelings about it? You have wearables. I'm wearing a smartwatch right now, right? An Apple Watch. Now, you do have to be cautious. These do measure physiology, but they don't do it very well. People think that they do it really well, but if you're familiar with a smartwatch, it's usually, I don't know if you can tell, but actually you can't because of the way it's, here. So you can see it's using light to measure your physiology. And the way it's doing that is it shines light through your skin to get to your blood vessels to see how fast your heart is beating and things like that. The problem is that's terribly inaccurate. Over the long term, it's actually good.
That's the moment here.
Yes, your smartwatch is terribly inaccurate. If you were to look at the second by second data, more than half of it is dropped data, and they fill in that data, right? So they use different algorithms to fill in the data to approximate what they think your heart rate is. So if you look over the period of a day, it's actually pretty good. But if you look second by second, it's terrible, right? So, keeping stuff in like we have interesting tools that we can use that are very getting into that augmented reality, that metaverse sort of situation. We're kind of already there. And so I think that's something that researchers and people interested in this area need to appreciate and understand better. How can we incorporate these new technologies that people are already using and incorporate it into understanding how they interact with products? Because it's possible. So we're doing a lot of research right now using augmented reality, having people use their cell phones and their cameras while they're shopping, and evaluating products in that way, using smart speakers to be able to understand, can we ask people questions while they're at home using a product to better understand what they do?
Yeah. Michelle, two brands that are using sensory marketing very well and like, you really felt delighted that that's the way to go about it. If anything comes to your mind, I mean,
the first one would be Coca-Cola, right? So Coca-Cola I bring up because if you were to close your eyes and you were to feel the bottle of Coca-Cola, you would be able to recognize it as being Coke. You could more than likely differentiate it from a Pepsi bottle because they have different shapes, right? And that's what I mean by sensory footprint, right? So being able to own your sensory footprint on touch, taste, smell, like visuals, everything, connect all the senses, own it, meaning that your brand is recognized and can be differentiated from your competitors on that smell, taste, touch, sight. And, if you can differentiate, then you have a very strong control of your sensory footprint, which means that you're doing sensory marketing right. So then let's say you have, and there's like another way that you can do it almost in a bad way, right? So another brand that kind of sticks out almost in a negative way is Abercrombie. So I don't know in your malls if you have Abercrombie and Fitch, but in our malls in the US, and I think in Europe as well, they have these stores and they're very dark, right? And it's weird because it's a clothing store. You think people would want to be able to see the clothing, but no, the stores are incredibly dark. You can't see anything, but you can sense that the store is there from like very far away. And you can tell you're getting closer because the smell is so strong. They use this perfume that's very strong. And whether or not you like Abercrombie, you know that it's there, right? And you can smell that and immediately that is Abercrombie, right? So that's another use of sensory marketing for good, for better or worse, right? They're able to signal those sort of things, but everybody does it, right? So whether it's Burger King that's pumping out the smell of burgers out of the top of their roof, or, Subway, you can smell that sort of sour bread kind of pickly smell of their sandwiches from far away. You have colors, you have, if you think about pink, right? Victoria's Secret kind of owns that color, pink. Tiffany's, that Tiffany blue, they literally named it Tiffany blue. They own it. You see that color, immediately that's Tiffany's, that box, right? So all of those, Apple does it really well. That whole experience of when you get your new iPhone, whether you get it in the store or you get it sent to you at home, the opening of that box is very, special to Apple. The smoothness of everything, the white,
every little thing packaged separately.
Everything packaged separately, but in a unique way, right? So not in your typical box way. So it is an experience, a sensory experience. So I think a lot of companies have really tapped into understanding that that's really meaningful to consumers, especially when you're thinking about brand loyalty, because you're creating an experience. You're creating a differentiated experience.
Yeah, for the brand to be distinctive. I mean, Byron Sharp says that's all you need. So what is one thing that you wish marketers could appreciate about sensory marketing to really own or to really have their own unique sensory footprint? Why are more brands not doing it? Or what is it that they need to understand?
I think first of all, there's a huge disconnect between marketing and R&D. So when we think, and a lot of people don't realize this, there's a whole department in just about every brand you can imagine has a department called sensory. Right. But if marketing were to let sensory have more of a seat at the table with giving the information that they know about consumers and the consumer experience and different drivers behind consumer choice, I think that there's a real connection to be made. And so when we talk about brand harmony, it's often like the work that we do is often bringing together that marketing side with that R&D side and saying, okay, you know what? If you guys communicated better and actually compared your research and added your research, integrated in, then you could actually have a harmonious product that would be much more appealing to consumers. So I think getting sensory a seat at that table, getting some understanding of that consumer experience is really key to owning like a sensory marketing space.
Michelle, in your talent show, would you like to talk about what made you get into Tango? What's unique about it, and what was your delight?
Tango, Argentine tango, right?
Okay.
So back when I was in undergrad, I liked taking ballroom dance classes. I thought it was really fun, but ballroom dance is very, strict, right? You have to very, straight and strict and tight and organized. And then in grad school, when I was getting my PhD, I saw these people at some event somewhere, and they were just dancing very fluidly and creatively to the music. And I was like, what is that dance? And I wasn't familiar. When I thought of tango, I thought of the very like this, right? But what they were doing was Argentine tango, and which is a lot more intimate. You're really leaning into, it's very tight. You're leaning in with your partner, and just little actions are going on in your feet, right? Even though you're like leaning close together. But it was so like creative and interpretive of the music, right? Where ballroom dancing was very strict about the steps. Argentine tango was a lot more open, right? And so I asked them, and I started taking classes. I learned about it, and eventually I ended up teaching it because that's right. That's the kind of personality I have, right? Like, so like I get obsessed with something, and I like want to know everything about it. I get really involved in it, and then I took it over. I started teaching it. I taught it for several years. I became president of the Purdue Tango Club.
That's something.
Yeah. It's like, I guess it's part of my nature. Like, so I really leaned into it, and it was beautiful. It was fun. It was a lot of, I started trying to, very similar to what I do with behavioral sciences and neuroscience and neuromarketing, is I found a way to teach it to people. And Purdue, where I did my grad school, is very engineering oriented school, right? So you have a lot of engineers who don't know how to dance, right? They don't know how to dance at all.
Exactly.
But I found a way, if you can break down the steps and break down the sort of formula to it in a way that they understood, which is very similar to what I try to do with all this scientific stuff. If I could break it down, I could teach anybody to dance in 30 minutes. And
Wow.
that's basically what
Anybody can dance from Michelle.
Yes. So if you see me at a conference, ask me.
Okay. So I start. One thing you'll take on a desert island.
Water.
Smart. Mother's best advice.
This too shall pass.
Favorite personal possession.
Ooh, I'm stuck a little bit, but family.
Alternate profession could have been.
Tango instructor.
It already is. Lovely. If you didn't have to sleep, what would you do with that time?
Read.
What would you do on Mars for fun?
Survive. Probably garden.
Very right answer. Your most often used phrase as per your husband.
Ooh. Probably no worries. I say no worries a lot.
Okay. I wish I could check it with him, Okay. Which animal will you like to be if given a choice?
Cat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they just lay around all the time. They're very happy. A house cat, particularly. Yes.
Yeah, they're less maintenance, actually, Yeah, I was wearing cat rings in the morning, Never mind. One thing no one knows about you.
One thing nobody, like not my husband, nobody.
Nobody.
Ooh, I'm pretty open with him, so that's a tough one. I like playing mobile games on my cell phone. I'm a little bit addicted to Candy Crush.
That's something. A book you'd like to gift to all your friends.
Cloud Atlas.
Okay. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Be careful.
It's like they're about to cross the road.
Actually, what I would really say is I would say it's okay to fail.
Michelle, I'd request you to share your online addresses, your blog online address, any podcast, anything that you'd like to mention here.
Okay. As you mentioned, we have our own podcast, vidcast, with HCD, where my colleague Catherine and I talk about all sorts of different topics. Sometimes we have interviews with people as well. We have a blog that we do on that website as well, on hcdi.net, where we talk about different topics. Of course, there's always LinkedIn. I'm happy always to link with people and answer any questions people have. I get lots of questions from students and people interested in the field, and I'm always happy to answer. So those are probably the easiest ways to reach me. And of course, you can email me directly. So please like, share, and subscribe, because this is really fun. I love the casual nature of it, and I love the different sort of questions that you've asked. This has been very enjoyable, and I really appreciate it.